Today, you will see the strongest hunter build ever made in Baldur's Gate 3, and I'm not lying, you will. Don't believe me? Just watch. At every stage of the game, by the way, whether it's Act 1, Act 2 or Act 3, you will dominate. The Dark Ice Hunter is the pinnacle of synergy, lethal damage output, self-sustain, and obliterating entire groups of enemies in one go. Because that is what true hunters excel at. They mark their prey and make sure they won't see the end of the day, while not having a say in what is going to be the hunter's way of making sure they go away forever. It doesn't matter how much you pray, because facing the Dark Hunter means, okay, game over, son. Hunters are completely self-made. They have an answer to every situation. They can heal, buff themselves, and just know what to do at all times. But the Dark Ice Hunter goes one step further. This powerful ranger is something else, and with connections to mysterious deities, has the capability to instill pure terror in enemies, while covering the battlefield with ice to make sure they can never ever do anything again. This hunter is a menace. So how does it work then, is what I hear you asking. This build is a 5 hunter, 1 war cleric, 4 rogue multi-class build till level 10. Then we go Respec at level 11 into a level 11 hunter with a 1 level cleric dip into the war domain. Reason being is that hunters till level 5 are amazing, and then from level 11 onwards, when you unlock one of the best sustained AoE damaging abilities of all time, Volley. However, between level 6 and level 10 we have a problem. Hunters do not get anything noteworthy in this bracket. It's a dead zone. But the Dark Ice Hunter wasn't a pure hunter during this stage of his life. See, while traversing through the Underdark, something happened to our hunter. Darker influences infiltrated the heart of our hunter, and the sheer contact with evil itself made sure our hunter had no choice other than to walk a more sinister path in life. Our hunter became somewhat of a rogue, a thief one might even say, and the Shadowlands made sure to corrupt our hunter even more, truly breaking its identity down to the core. But was that what our hunter truly was, deep inside? Or was it just a moment of reflection, ultimately, to see if the new path is really what our hunter craves? The answer was the latter, because back in Baldur's Gate, the warmth of the city and the happiness of the people started chewing off the hatred trying to consume our hunter. The beauty of life brought the hunter back from the figurative death and bad forces, and through contact with the beauty of life, went back to its original roots. The Dark Ice Hunter, however, made sure to become stronger and stronger through its experiences, and kept its divine magic intact while always staying loyal to Maliki, the supreme ranger and goddess of the forest. And now you know why this hunter follows the multi-class distributions as discussed earlier. This video is organized as following. We will construct the build in 3 parts, and each part pertains to one of the 3 acts. Every act is a part where we go over the levels, how to play, and best combat strategy, and the gear for every act. Basically, we will make sure that if you follow my build, you will destroy at every single moment of the game. Starting off with Act 1. For level 1 to 5, our Dark Ice Hunter leveled as following. Bounty Hunter for the proficiency in investigation and the disadvantage on saving throws of our enemies for ensnaring strike, a really powerful early game tool, and Beast Tamer to make sure we can cast Find Familiar without needing to expend a spell slot, and Find Familiar is a very powerful spell early on that we're going to utilize a lot, so this pick makes a lot of sense. Abilities, we get 16 dexterity as it's going to be our main damage scaling ability, and we need a high dexterity for initiative as well. You want to have your turn as fast as possible as a hunter that can strike from any distance, and we also get 16 wisdom since it fuels our spell casting and will also give us more damage early on, which I will talk about in a second. 14 constitution for the HP, and the bonus to constitution saving throws to maintain our concentration spells since we will use those extensively with this build, and then the final points can be spent on charisma. For race, I'm going to be either recommending a wood elf or a wood half elf for that extra juicy movement, and Fae and Ancestry, which is really nice for preventing getting charmed and falling asleep. Alternatively, Drow is a really good option too for that early game advantage to offset Sharpshooter through Fairy Fire, and aesthetically it fits the idea perfectly of this build, and it has Fae Ancestry as well as Superior Dark Vision. Dwargar is finally also a great race option. With its enlarged ability, you can get even more damage in, which is nice for the build, and it has Dwargar Resilience for better protection versus various CC effects. But alternatively, using this build on Astarion is great as well, since he gets a bite ability that can heal you, which will synergize very well with a certain aspect of this build that we'll get into in a second, and you can ascend with Astarion for even more damage as well. And yeah, Astarion is just a great pick too. Pick your race or companion, whatever you want to do, and you're good to go. Level 2, you pick Goodberry and Hunter's Mark. Incredibly important to pick exactly these two at this level, otherwise the world will end, so do so. Fighting style, obviously we're going to go with archery here as an archer. That +2 bonus is the creme de la creme. Level 3, ensnaring strike to get the most benefits out of Bounty Hunter if you don't have a long strider puppet in your theme yet. Otherwise, long strider is going to be the play here, as we get something much better than ensnaring strike real soon. That extra movement for you and your entire team without ever expending a spell slot is just too good for the world. Then for our Hunter Spray, we're going to go Horde Breaker here. It is the most fun out of the three, as it's an AoE ability that you can set up really well and consistently that can deal really good damage early on, and we're going to make sure to abuse it as much as possible. Level 4, then we get Sharpshooter, which will give us insane extra damage, 10 damage at the cost of a -5 attack roll penalty, but we will offset that penalty as much as possible. You know me, to make it pretty much a net positive to go for Sharpshooter here. Then level 5, we get an absolute amazing ability, one of the best things this game has ever seen, and you get it as a hunter. That is going to facilitate your gameplay loop very well. It's called Spike Growth. Just wait a few seconds to see exactly what I'm talking about. Now with Act 1, levels and abilities selected, let's get into the gear you want to get as fast as possible in Act 1. Starting off with the headpiece, the Diadem of Arcane Synergy, which will give us Arcane Synergy every time we apply a condition, which is going to be like always, considering it works with, say, Hunter's Mark and a lot of the stuff that hunters can do. And Arcane Synergy gives us extra damage basically equal to our spellcasting ability. As a hunter, if you recall, we got a bunch of points in Wisdom, which is our spellcasting ability. So those levels will all add up to our damage rolls going forward with this headpiece. Basically just extra damage on every single hit, which is really nice. Graceful Cloth then for our chest piece, which is really good for any dexterity character really, as it gives us a +2 dexterity bonus, which early on is really good for extra damage and accuracy. And this piece also gives us extra sustain and extra mobility. Overall, just a very good piece. Get it as soon as possible. Gloves of Archery for our gloves then. These were just made for us archers. Get it, it's more damage. Boots of Striding for the boots. We will concentrate a lot with this build, as you will see in a second. So these boots gives us extra momentum when we do so, meaning extra movement, and also prevents us from getting prone and other annoying CC that moves us around. Very good boots. For the bow, we have to go with the Titan String bow right here. No questions asked really. It is an amazing bow that you can pick up very early on. And it's amazing because you can get a bunch of strength to enhance it pretty much the second you get to the Druid Grove, as you can just buy them strength elixirs from Auntie Ethel infinitely. Check my Monk Get OP early video to know about all of that, but I hear you. You don't want to sip elixirs. You don't want to waste your time sipping those drinks like a peasant. You want to be comfortably OP. So Club of the Hill Giant it is. You get it in Act 1 as well, and it sets your strength to 19 just to equip it. Never have to worry about anything again, and with it you will get a very juicy +4 modifier to every single shot you're going to accordingly make with the Titan String bow. And this bow is a +1 longbow as well that will benefit from our high dexterity too. The damage gets nuts with this bow and the club. So yeah, get both of them. For our offhand, we grab the Safeguard Shield, which you can get within 2 seconds of playing the game. It gives us a boost to our armor class and saving throws. Really good. Then for rings, we go Strange Conduit Ring for another 1d4 bonus, because we will be concentrating all the time like I said. And the Whispering Promise, which is going to synergize with our good berries, just like our amulet, the Brood Mother's Revenge, which gives us a whopping 1d6 extra damage every time we get our good berries in. And that's exactly the reason why we got those good berries at level 2 as a hunter as soon as possible. So with that, let's immediately jump over to the combat strategy to completely dominate those, say, first 6 levels or so. Your good berries that we got at level 2 activate both our rings, so giving us a 1d4 bonus to our attack rolls, helping out tremendously with offsetting Sharpshooter, as well as to our saving throws, which then in turn helps out tremendously with maintaining our concentration spells like Hunter's Mark and Spike Growth, which makes the synergy with Goodberry very good. And then it also gives us that extra poison damage with our amulet, so you want to conjure good berries at the start of the day and eat them as much as possible through the day and before you enter combat and through your turns when your effects fall off, as they consume a bonus action. So these berries and their just mentioned implications pair perfectly with our attacks, which consume normal actions. Then aside from the berries, you want to cast Hunter's Mark on your primary target as much as possible for the extra damage. Reapply it every time it falls off, so you upkeep that damage bonus. And thanks to the plethora of elements in this build that promote us keeping our concentration up, up, it's going to be pretty much always applied as early as Act 1. Hunter's Mark is one part of the concentration pack deal though, and you want to mainly use it versus solo, higher HP targets, or if you're just facing a few beefy enemies. However, if you're facing large groups, say more than 4 enemies grouped together at the same time, then Spike Growth is an absolutely fantastic alternative. Just look at this, enemies will generally gather around in a relatively small radius in this game. You then, as a self-sustaining hunter, will cast Spike Growth on them, and every single time they move an inch, they will take damage. The damage stacking cumulatively like this is absolutely fantastic. It's ridiculous. Just look at all these numbers. And as you see, our hunter just completely kills off whatever tries to move on our death fields that not just only deal damage, but also slow down our enemies significantly. And again, we have great concentration upkeep thanks to all the gear that I mentioned that you can get as early as Act 1, so this ability is going to be applied very consistently. Decide for yourself if you're going to use Hunter's Mark or Spike Growth for your concentration spell, depending on the number of enemies. However, things like Spike Growth also set up perfectly for Heartbreaker, the amazing ability we got at level 3, and it's definitely amazing because you can around enemies by, say, moving away from them to make sure they path towards you, to group them together like that, to make sure you can utilize Heartbreaker very consistently. And 2 shots back to back, consuming only 1 attack as early as level 3 with a Titan String bow and high strength modifier, well yeah, that's really good and juicy. Making Hunter an absolute nuclear pick in Act 1 in my opinion. Just check all these clips of destruction. I might be biased though, because this class is one of my favorites, and you might then think, wait, if that is the case, why then have you only now started making a build for a Hunter when the game is already 9 months out or so? Well, it's because my other Ranger build, this one, you might know of it, was released very early on in the life cycle of Baldur's Gate 3, which is also a very fun to play Ranger build, so I didn't want to make too many Ranger builds, back to back, but now it is time to shine for the kings and queens of AoE, Hunters. So yeah, nice life story and such, but where was I? Oh yeah, Heartbreaker, which is amazing. Now, if you have troubles grouping enemies together, no problem. Remember what we took for our Natural Explorer? Yes, Beast a Tamer, which gives us the ability to cast our Fight Familiar ability for free, meaning we can utilize the cat like this, and strategically position our lovely little fluffy friend to make it meow to gather enemies around specifically for Heartbreaker. Because then you enter the battle, you have 2 enemies side to side after the meow, and you annihilate them like that. But the cat isn't the only familiar that will shine. More often than not, you can kite around, like I already said, to group your enemies. So in those cases, the Raven is going to be your pick in these first levels, as this brutal pecker can give you advantage on every single target it pecks, which is absolutely amazing because that means that Sharpshooter gets not only completely offset in combination with our gear and our Raven, but we have very good, ridiculous accuracy early on with a bunch of modifiers to annihilate any enemy. You can also use the Oil of Accuracy to make your accuracy even better. You can farm the materials for this oil very early on the beach, for example, so you can consider that as well. But keep in mind, using Heartbreaker means you have 3 attacks as early as level 5, and all of those attacks will be super buffed. And that is the combat strategy for Act 1. Leveling after level 5, you then go for a level 6 War Cleric pick. Yes, we're going to dip in the Cleric class now, because we're entering the Hunter Dead Zone. And at this point in time, you're going to be in the Underdark, or maybe even already moving up to the Shadowlands. So it's Identity Crisis time. Get that dip, and we're heading out on our dark route into a rogue, and having ties to divinity. Yes sir, get guidance, thaumaturgy, and light for your cantrips. All 3 very useful, especially guidance, which is easily the best non-damage related cantrip in the game, helps you out tremendously with those ability checks. Then for spells, 2 spells are mandatory for your entire playthrough, Command and Sanctuary. You will understand why as we progress through the video, and then the other 2 are up to choice, but Healing Word is a very good option here. A heal on a bonus action as a hunter, yeah, that's always a very welcome thing to have. And for your 4th spell here, it's just going to be a flex option, but I would say Create Water is great with the various setups that you can do with it, where Wetness gives double damage to cold and lightning damage. So say using lightning arrows as a hunter, for example, to get really good damage, while potentially setting up for other party members that benefit from exactly that synergy as well. Then from level 7 to level 10, we get them rogue levels, unlocking sneak attacks and cunning actions with Thief as our subclass, and an ability improvement in dexterity for our 2nd feat. The gear you want to run for Act 2 looks as following then. What remains the same is our headpiece, our amulet, our bow, and our club of Hill Giant Strength, but we have now upgraded our gloves. gloves to the flawed Helldust gloves, which is going to give us even more damage for every single shot, and we're now going to use the UNT scale mail for insane armor class, since our dexterity will be very high at this point in time. We have upgraded our shield as well to the Sentinel shield, which gives us amazing extra initiative, pretty much guaranteeing us always having the first turn. We have our Cloak of Cunning Broom for the blind on disengage and the Speedy Light feed to generate lightning charges on dashes. Note that we now have dashes and disengages on a bonus action and having 2 bonus action per turn as well, thanks to the Thief in us. Rings, we now have swapped out the previous rings and swapped in the Risky ring, giving us advantage on all of our shots, and the Snowburst ring, which will create fields of ice under our enemies with every shot. How the strategy in Act 2 works then is as following. Make sure to get the Drake Throat Glaive in Act 2 and give it to any of your teammates, then cast it on your hunter and give it the cold damage buff. This will give your bow a +1 bonus as well as a nice 1d4 cold damage bonus for every single shot. With our Snowburst ring then proccing those ice fields on every shot, which is going to crowd control our enemies really consistently. And prone is one of the best status effects in the game. Everything I said in Act 1 is still very relevant here, so keep that in mind. But now our damage is just going to be really good. Our sneak attacks proc every turn thanks to our Risky ring, which is a 2d6 bonus, and you can start one-shotting enemies. As you see from this clip, the damage gets really good. You now have poison, cold, fire, lightning damage and sneak damage, all in addition to your already super buffed bow shots. The lightning damage comes from our cunning action dash, which you want to use as much as well, since we have 2 bonus actions now, so you can consistently use one of those on a dash to reposition yourself and get insane mobility at the same time to build up those lightning charges. The lightning charges are essentially just extra damage and a great way to utilize our second bonus action in Act 2. Then alternatively, we can go for the disengage on a bonus action when we need to blind our enemies. Outside of that, the strategy in Act 2 is going to be very similar to Act 1 in terms of how we want to utilize our Horde Breaker, our familiars, our good berries, our concentration spells, so keep that in mind till you get to Act 3 or level 11, when the build ascends to levels beyond what a human can possibly comprehend. Like I said, at level 11 you respec. So now in those first 5 levels, get exactly the same things as the first time around, except for at level 3. Don't get Heartbreaker now because the volley completely renders it obsolete, but get Colossus Slayer instead, which is just extra damage every turn. Level 6, we now continue as a hunter and get Keeper of the Veil as favorite enemy just purely for the arcane proficiency. The spell is not relevant. Then for Natural Explorer, if you want to make your hunter your sleight of hand expert for pickpocketing and stealing and disarming traps and that kind of stuff, which syncs very well with the high dexterity on this build, then absolutely pick Urban Tracker. If not, then just go for Wasteland Wanderer Fire for the fire resistance, since fire is a very common type of damage in the game. Level 7, we get Lesser Restoration for the situational use, which is nice, and we go with multi-attack defense here because the other 2 options are complete trash, and defensive tactics might as well have been just called multi-attack defense because it's actually a great defensive ability and there's no use case where you pick the others really, so get that multi-attack defense. Level 8, we get ability improvement in dexterity obviously, and with the Mirror of Laws in Act 3 you should have at least 20 dexterity at this point in time, so make sure to grab that too. Level 9, we get Plant Growth, it's the only great option here. Level 10, we get Sanctified Stalker for the religion proficiency, again the spell is not relevant, and we get Wasteland Wanderer Poison for our third Natural Explorer. If you however took Urban Tracker before, then take Wasteland Wanderer Fire instead here. Level 11 then, we get the trophy of the build and why we respect in the first place. Volley, an absolutely amazing ability. You'll see it in a second, and for spells just grab Lightning Arrow to stick to the team I guess, but you rarely will actually use it over your volley, so it's mostly just here because we have to pick something. Level 12, we get the War Cleric dip and grab exactly all the same stuff like the first time around before the respec. With leveling then fully covered, you will grab the following items for Act 3. We grab Ambusher and Rhapsody now for weapons. These will make our damage output amazing. Then grab the Boots of Stormy Claimer, as well as we will apply conditions on entire groups of the volley, so we will build up Reverberation real fast. Helldust Gloves for even more damage compared to the gloves we picked up in Act 2. Armor of Agility for even more armor class compared to the armor we picked up in Act 2. Cloak of Displacement for the insane sustain. insane, and it stacks very well with multi-attack defense, which we grabbed at level 7 Hunter. Helmet of arcane acuity then, and I will go over why exactly this helmet in a second when we get to combat strategy. Amulet, we still use the amazing Brute Mother's Revenge, and rings are also still the same, the Risky Ring and the Snowburst Ring. We replace our Titan String Bow now with the Bow of the Banshee, because with it and Volley we can frighten entire groups with one attack. Now obviously you can also still use Titan String and chuck those Act 3 elixirs that give you 27 strength for an alternative way, but with Bow of the Banshee you will have insane CC in addition to insane damage. Especially because, yes, let's transfer over to the combat strategy of Act 3. With our bow we will apply frightening, and with our Snowburst Ring we will apply ice fields beneath our enemies thanks to Drake's Throat Glaive, making our bow cold damage. Ice fields makes our enemies prone, and thus they will need to use movement to stand up, but frightening makes them unable to move. So basically it is a full skip turn with amazing synergy if both apply at the same time. We get absolutely insane crowd control here with our setup as the Dark Ice Hunter. And thanks to Volley hitting multiple targets at the same time, we will build up 10 stacks of arcane acuity pretty much instantly for our helmet of arcane acuity, because with one attack we will attack entire groups, and with 10 stacks of arcane acuity, the spell save DC tied to whether our enemies will fall on the ice when they move will be pretty much impossible to beat for them. So what essentially happens in layman terms is that our enemies will always fall flat on their face every single time they move on ice. It is guaranteed crowd control thanks to our helmet. And I wasn't lying when I said that our crowd control becomes absolutely mind-boggling at this stage of the game. With our insane arcane acuity stacking, we can then also use command to have a pretty much 100% guaranteed application rate to multiple targets at the same time when we upcast it, so we can CC entire groups of enemies like that as well. Outside of that, you just want to use Volley as much as possible in Act 3. It is a great ability that you can finally use in Act 3 that you can also use up to 3 times per turn with this build thanks to our extra attack and the War Cleric War Charges, and with it you can completely dominate entire hordes of enemies on Honor Mode. It is the prolific Hunter ability, and we have now super buffed it with damage modifiers from a bunch of sources, and we have ingrained 2 types of CC inside of it that is going to completely control our enemies. For additional micro combat strategy, I would also use Divine Favor now instead of Hunter's Mark for our concentration spell for our damage buff, since it will apply to every hit instead of just one target. And with Sanctuary you can gather enemies around you very easily for a nice volley, or you can just use it as an excellent breather moment as it makes you invulnerable, so a very good defensive spell. However, in group play you can use your tank, CC, or just Sky to make sure enemies group together for your volley as well. A lot of options. With your volley you have insane damage and crowd control like I already said, but with our gear we will also have great defense and sustain, making the build overall just amazing. It all ties together. With that we have come to the end of my Dark Ice Hunter build, the best hunter build of all time in my opinion. If you want a written guide of this build or any of my other builds, check my Patreon. I have all of those there in the form of high quality indexed written guides, or if you just want to support the channel, check it out. Thank you very much, and also make sure to subscribe and like the video if you haven't done so yet, and let me know your thoughts in the comments.